Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Deshira. I am an incarnated angel as well as an Akashic record reader and a palm reader. Today I wanted to talk about or continue to talk about angelic beings. And I already did a first video on different types of angelic beings. I think I covered 3. In today's video, I wanted to just cover one, which are fairies. Now, I know you may think about fairies. Why fairies? Don't worry. I'll let you know soon, just stick with me. When you look into folklore, specifically Irish and Scottish folklore, I know that there are fairy-like creatures referenced in other cultures, but I mentioned Scottish and Irish culture because those fairies mentioned there are usually the ones that are best known. I guess you could say the most popular around the world, and the ones that people often look for information about. So when you look into folklore, and when you also look into people's experiences with fairies, you will find that most stories are of bad, mischievous, or evil types of fairies that tend to kidnap people, kidnap children. And when they kidnap them, they either do it for slavery or a specific task, of which, if completed, then the people or children are allowed to go back home. But they also, in these stories, and the fairies also tend to curse people just because, or kill them due to some type of offense that the human has committed towards the fairies. In some tales, though, we can see that it is acknowledged that even though most stories are of bad or evil fairies, there are still some good fairies. These specific stories where there are both good and bad fairies make reference to the unseelie and seelie courts. The unseelie court being the one who are malevolent and include fairies such as the banshee and the redcaps. The redcaps are a type of fairy that, what's the word? They put their hats into the blood of their victims, and that's the reason that they are red. I know, creepy. And then we have the seelie court, which is the benevolent court, where there are fairies more willing to help people and other animals without asking much for in return. Now, when you either ask or look up experiences of people that have had some time of contact with fairies, you will hear or find mostly negative experiences as well. But you will also notice that it depends on the person you're asking or listening to. I, for one, have noticed that older people tend to have bad experiences with fairies, while some younger generations, especially if they are witches that specifically work with fairies, they have more of neutral stories or have much more positive experiences along with the negatives. So the question is, are fairies evil or good? I would say both. There are some fairies who are definitely evil, while there are others who are much more benevolent. Now, I'm not saying go ahead and try to contact fairies without looking more into them, because, those negative experiences that people have had do have some kind of base for them. It's not just taken out of their sleeves or anything like that. I mean, there's too much of these stories. So if you ever do want to contact or have an experience with fairies, do your research and look into ways you can protect yourself and how you can prevent yourself from being duped by fairies. Nevertheless, there are some fairies, like I said, who are benevolent. But we do have to remember that fairies in general do not have the same values or operate under the same laws as humans do, which is why you should research them before going into any type of contact with fairies. They operate under a different set of beliefs and systems that humans don't understand, which is probably why, to us, fairies seem mischievous or as if they change their minds radically. Still, that doesn't mean that all fairies are evil or necessarily mischievous. Now, why do I say this? I say this because of the Akashic Records. Now, like I said before, I am an Akashic Record reader, and my first encounter with fairy energy was while reading Akashic Records for different people. This is where I noticed that a lot of my clients have been fairies in their past lives. One of my clients even had a fairy soul blueprint instead of a human soul blueprint, even though in this lifetime, this client is human. Also, in every single one of those readings, I always got the message that in order to continue their journey of incarnation, in order for the soul, this client's soul, to continue their journey of incarnation and approximate themselves more to the physical realm, at some point, they chose to be fairies. This gave them the opportunity to still be tied to the angelic realms because fairies had angelic DNA. That's what I got from many of my readings. And this also helped them be able to interact in the third dimension until they were ready to incarnate as humans. But why did they need to still be tied to the angelic realms? It was because all of my clients, in essence, their core, they were all angelic beings. Their core was angelic. They all came from the angelic realms originally, before being fairies. All of the clients that I read for who ended up having fairy past lives were actually, like I said, angelic beings who were looking to incarnate as humans, but they had to do it slowly. Because angelic energy is very powerful and very light, they needed to approximate themselves to the lower and heavier realms, which is the third dimensional realm, through different types of incarnations, and these different types of incarnations help them to slowly descend from the angelic realms into the human realms. One of those incarnations that helped them do it was an incarnation as a fairy. Now here's where I start piecing together that fairies do have some ties to the angelic realms, but I didn't know any specifics other than being told that fairies had angelic DNA and that both fairies and angels used trees as portals, which will explain why in folklore and people's experiences, fairies get angry when you cut down or destroy trees because trees are their portals, whether that is to another fairy dimension or the angelic dimensions. But let me give you some examples of some things I saw in my readings. So, one of the first past lives that I saw that involved fairies was one of my clients. I'm gonna call her this client a she because as a fairy, it was a female fairy. So she, as a fairy, I remember when I was reading for her, I saw this little tiny fairy that was kind of like flying around this forest where there were also crystals, and they were near the beach, if I'm not mistaken. And I saw my client as a fairy go around healing plants and tending to crystals, and also tending to the, it looked like a human, but I'm not sure if it was a human. There was someone else there that was bigger and taller than the little fairy. And this little, I think it was a priestess of some kind. And this little fairy, my client who was a fairy, was tending to that priestess and helping her take care of things. I had another client who I also saw that their past life was a fairy. I remember also seeing this client. I'm gonna call her also a she. I'm calling her she because in a past life this person was a she. So she, as a fairy, I also saw her in a forest, but this time she was kind of working alone and working on growing the plants and healing trees and opening portals. The third person I ever saw with a fairy background was actually my sister. So when I went to read for my sister, what I saw was that in a past life, my sister was a fairy, and she was a fairy to who would become her daughter in this lifetime. So her daughter and her were in a past life together, and this was in Atlantis. I remember seeing what I saw was that my sister was a fairy, and she was kind of like flying circles around this girl. I think it was a baby. And she was taking care of the baby, and I saw, I don't know how to explain this. It was like a city, but not any type of city that we see today. It was a city, you know what, kind of like oh my god, I forgot the movie. Atlantis. You know, if you've seen the animated movie Atlantis: The Lost Empire, when they get to Atlantis, that all of the entire city is made of a stone, and they have like carvings that shine blue on the stone, on the stones. Yeah, that was kind of like something like that. But the buildings were also made of crystals as well. And then let me see. There was one other that I wanted to talk to you about. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I found it. So, this client was also a fairy in their past life. And what I got for this client specifically is that this client, her, I'm also gonna call her a she because in a past life, her fairy past life was a she as well. It's kind of interesting now that I think about it. All of the clients I've had, whether male or female, have been female fairies for some reason. But anyway, this client, what I got for her was that her guides, her angelic guides as well, specifically her angelic guides, were urging her to go to the fairies or the elementals, and specifically the fairies because they hold angelic DNA and angelic information that my client needed to access. Her guides also told her that fairies can help her with healing and energy transmissions as they hold angelic plant and mystical energies. Let me read that again. Fairies can also help with healing and energy transmissions as they hold angelic plants and mystical energies. I also got here that there was specifically a fairy guide that wanted to contact my client, and that this fairy guide, it was another female fairy guide. And this female fairy guide, I was told, was actually created from my client's angelic energies when my client was in her angelic state, meaning that my client was not human and did not have shape or form. And this right here should have been kind of like an eye opener for me, but for some reason my mind didn't understand what it was being told, nor what I wrote down, until last year, where I went into a guided journey with, let's call her a mentor. And in that guided journey, I saw myself as my angelic self, without form and without shape. But I saw myself kind of extending a part of me. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I had to pause it right there, but I'm back. And yeah, I do remember that in this meditation, I saw myself as my angelic self, and I extended part of my energy out, and it was kind of, you can imagine your own arm kind of like opening. So I saw that part of that energetical part of myself opening in a way, and out came a fairy. So it was like I was in my angelic form, I was creating fairies, like right out of my own energy, which matches what I got for my client. And I'll read it again, is that she had a female fairy guide that was created when with my client's own angelic energies, when my client was still in their angelic form. So this is why I say that fairies are actually angelic beings. Now, this is all due to the Akashic Records and my own intuition. So if you wish to not take this information in, because it's really truly all experiential, there's really no evidence for this, that's fine. But if you would also like to take this in and look for more information on self, that's great as well. I, for one, will continue to say that fairies are from the angelic realms. Now, I'm not sure what happened to them that they decided to become malevolent, but I'm guessing it was a similar story to the angels of heaven. As we know, some of them, Lucifer, and some of the Watchers also decided they wanted to cut themselves off from God, and they fell. And I think something similar happened with the fairies that we have now. And that also would explain why the fairies that we do have now are mostly malevolent, or at least the ones in folklore. But I hope you learned something from this, or you find this entertaining. If you would like to help out the channel and help out the making of these videos, I will leave links below. And thank you so much for being here, for watching, and for listening. And I will see you all on my next video. Bye!